Okay, so buckle up because today's deep dive is, well, it's a fascinating intersection. We're talking autism and dysnomia.
Hmm.
You've sent over some really intriguing research on this, and I'm ready to unpack it all.
Yeah, it's a combination that I think often surprises people.
Okay.
Many people know about autism,
Right,
but dysnomia doesn't always get the same kind of attention.
right.
But it can really significantly impact someone's daily life, especially in the context of autism.
Right, it's not exactly a household term.
Yeah, yeah,
So before we dive into the connection, let's start with like a solid understanding of each. What are we really talking about when we say autism spectrum disorder and dysnomia?
you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
So in simple terms, you can almost imagine autism as
Okay.
a different way that the brain processes the world around it.
Okay.
So it affects how someone interacts with others, how they communicate, and how they behave. And what's crucial to remember here is that it's a spectrum, meaning it presents differently in every single individual.
Okay, so lots of variation within autism itself.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, what about dysnomia? What's going on there?
So think of those times that, when you go to, think of the right word and it's just not there.
Oh, yeah.
That frustrating tip of the tongue feeling.
Yes.
Dysnomia is like that, but imagine it happening much more frequently.
Wow.
Um, and it is a language disorder, but importantly, it doesn't reflect intelligence.
Okay.
Your source really aptly calls it difficulty finding and retrieving words.
Difficulty finding and retrieving words.
Yeah,
That really hits home because I think, on occasion we've all been there, even
exactly.
if it's not a constant struggle.
Yeah.
And I imagine that frequent struggle could be incredibly frustrating, especially layered on top of the social communication differences that can come with autism. Which leads us to the heart of this deep dive,
Mm.
the connection between the two. Why is it that autism and dysnomia often show up together?
Yeah, it's not just a coincidence.
Okay.
While, of course, more research is always being done, studies suggest that there's a shared neurological basis for both autism and dysnomia.
Mm.
So you can think of the brain as this, complex network of pathways.
Right.
And in both conditions, these pathways, particularly those related to language processing and sensory input, may be wired a bit differently.
So there could be some common ground in how the brain is wired,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is absolutely fascinating. But how does that actually play out in a person's everyday life?
Yeah, so let's paint a picture.
Okay.
Imagine you're constantly bombarded with sensory information.
Okay.
Bright lights, loud sounds, textures, all competing for your attention.
Yeah.
That's the reality for many on the autism spectrum.
Right.
Now, add on the constant struggle of trying to find the right words in the middle of all of that.
Wow. So you're already trying to navigate a world that can feel overwhelming
Yeah.
from a sensory perspective, and then you layer on this whole other challenge of
Exactly.
accessing and expressing language effectively.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
it's a lot, and it's like trying to have a focused conversation in the middle of
Yeah.
a bustling marketplace.
Right.
Your brain is working overtime to process everything, which can make, pulling out that right word at the right time even more challenging.
Yeah.
And this isn't just limited to social situations either.
Oh, wow.
This can impact communication across all areas of life.
You're right. This could affect everything from like ordering food to writing an email to
Yeah.
expressing complex emotions.
All the way.
It really highlights just how important language is
Hmm.
for all of us.
Yeah.
Now, our research mentions that a few specific factors can kind of exacerbate the experience of dysnomia for someone with autism. The first one that stood out to me was the impact of sensory processing, which we just touched upon.
Right.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Absolutely. So we know that, individuals with autism can experience sensory input differently.
Okay.
Imagine your brain as a filter.
Okay.
For many on the spectrum, that filter might not screen out as much sensory information, leading to this feeling of being bombarded by sights, sounds, smells, textures
Right.
all at once.
So it's not just about being like, air quotes, sensitive to sensory input.
Yeah,
It's that their brains are literally processing it differently.
exactly. Yeah.
Which makes sense, but I never thought about it quite like that.
Yeah.
How does that sensory overload actually affect someone's ability to find the words they need?
Well, think about it this way. If your brain is working overtime to process this wave of sensory information,
Okay.
it can be that much harder to also find those specific words you need to express yourself clearly.
Right.
It's like trying to have a relaxing phone call
Okay.
while a marching band is practicing outside your window.
That's a great analogy. It
Yeah.
really drives home how draining that sensory overload can be
Yeah.
and how it could impact something as essential as language.
Right.
It's not just about knowing the words, it's about accessing them when your brain is already working on overdrive.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's another crucial factor that can play a role here,
Okay.
and that's executive function.
Okay, executive function sounds important, but also a little intimidating.
It can be a mouthful, yeah.
What exactly does that mean in this context?
So imagine executive function as like the brain's management team.
Okay.
It's what helps us plan, organize our thoughts, prioritize tasks, even self-regulate our emotions.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a big job. You can almost think of it like an air traffic controller
Okay.
for your brain, making sure everything runs smoothly.
I like that.
Yeah.
So if our executive function is like an air traffic controller, how does that connect to dysnomia, particularly for someone with autism?
Well, so imagine that air traffic controller is dealing with like rush hour of activity,
Okay.
lots of planes taking off and landing.
Right.
That's like the sensory overload we talked about.
Okay.
Now try to add in finding the right word,
Oh, wow.
like
Yeah.
locating a specific plane
Right.
in that busy airspace.
Right.
It becomes much harder to pull that word out of our mental lexicon
Right.
when our brain is juggling so many other demands at once.
That makes so much sense. So not only are you trying to process all the sensory information,
Yes.
but then you're also trying to organize your thoughts, access language,
Yes.
all while navigating social interactions.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. It's like trying to hold a coherent conversation while also solving a math problem and packing for a trip
Yeah.
all at the same time.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
It really highlights how these challenges can intertwine and make daily life even more complex for individuals with autism and dysnomia.
That's a really, really helpful way to understand it.
Good to go.
And it definitely paints a vivid picture of what someone might be experiencing internally.
Yeah,
Even if it's not outwardly obvious at all.
exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of understanding, I'm curious to learn more about what can help.
Sure.
I know our listeners are probably eager to hear about that as well.
Of course, of course.
So what can help?
So I want to emphasize that even though these are complex conditions, there are absolutely ways to support individuals with autism and dysnomia to communicate more effectively and confidently.
That's fantastic. So let's dive into some of those support strategies. Where do we even begin?
Well, our research highlights several promising approaches,
Okay.
and one of the simplest but also one of the most effective is using visual supports.
Visual supports. Okay, I've heard a bit about those.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about how they actually work. What do they look like in practice?
So it's all about providing alternative ways to access and express language, going beyond just spoken words. So imagine using pictures, symbols, written cues, or even objects to represent ideas.
So instead of just saying, I want juice, someone could point to a picture of a juice box.
Exactly.
That seems especially helpful for those moments when the spoken word just feels impossible to grasp.
You got it. And visual supports can really bridge that communication gap and reduce frustration for, honestly, everyone involved.
Right.
And the beauty is that they can be tailored to an individual's specific needs and interests.
Okay. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
No, not at all.
You really have to consider the individual and what works best for them.
Exactly.
Are there different types of visual supports?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many creative ways to incorporate visual supports. One example is social stories,
Okay.
which use simple text and visuals to kind of explain social situations.
Okay.
And these can be incredibly helpful for individuals with autism who might struggle with understanding social cues
Mm-hmm.
or navigating unexpected events.
That makes sense. Like a little comic strip that helps explain what to expect in different social settings.
Yes, exactly.
What are some other types?
Another great example is visual schedules.
Okay.
These use pictures or symbols to represent different activities throughout the day.
Uh-huh.
So it provides this clear and predictable routine,
Oh, okay.
which can be especially comforting for, individuals who thrive on structure.
That makes a lot of sense. Visual schedules could be helpful for, honestly, anyone.
Oh, for sure.
But especially for those who might feel overwhelmed by the uncertainty of, a changing schedule.
Exactly. Exactly.
It sounds like visual supports can be incredibly powerful tools
They can.
for enhancing communication and reducing anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the best part is that they can be really easily integrated into various settings
Okay.
at home, at school, in the community to create a more supportive and inclusive environment.
That's wonderful. It's about meeting individuals where they are and
Exactly.
providing them with the tools they need to thrive.
Exactly.
Now, our research also mentions speech therapy as another really vital support strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people associate speech therapy with like young children learning to pronounce their R's.
Right, right.
But it's so much more than that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, while speech therapy can definitely help with articulation, it encompasses a much broader range of communication skills.
So, what else does speech therapy kind of address, particularly for someone with both autism and dysnomia?
Yeah, so speech language pathologists, or SLPs for short,
Okay.
are trained to assess and treat a variety of communication challenges.
Uh-huh.
In the context of autism and dysnomia, they can work on improving vocabulary, sentence structure, conversational skills, and even what we call social pragmatics,
Okay.
which are like the unspoken rules of communication.
That's so important, especially those social pragmatics,
Okay.
things that many of us take for granted,
Absolutely.
like, oh, I don't know, not interrupting,
Yeah,
or knowing when it's your turn to speak.
right.
Right.
Exactly. And the beauty of speech therapy is that it's highly individualized.
Okay.
So, SLPs work closely with each person to identify their unique strengths, their unique needs, and really tailor those therapy sessions to address those specific goals.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No, not all.
It's about creating a personalized plan
Yeah.
that empowers the individual to communicate more effectively in a way that feels authentic to them.
You got it. That's it. And for individuals with autism and dysnomia, that personalized approach can honestly be life-changing.
I bet. Now, I'm also excited to talk about another support strategy that feels particularly relevant in today's world, and that's assistive technology.
Yes.
It's an area that's constantly evolving and opening up such incredible possibilities.
I know.
For individuals who communicate differently, what are some examples of assistive technology that can be particularly beneficial for individuals with autism and dysnomia?
So one that comes to mind immediately is speech-to-text software, which, I mean, this incredible tool allows someone to type what they want to say,
Uh-huh.
and the software speaks it aloud for them,
Wow.
which can be a game changer for those moments when retrieving spoken words just feels impossible.
I can see how incredibly liberating that would be, especially in situations where you might feel pressured to speak quickly
Totally.
or, clearly articulate yourself.
Yeah.
What other assistive technologies are out there?
Another fantastic option is communication apps.
Okay.
So these are apps specifically designed for individuals with communication differences.
Hmm.
They often include customizable visual supports, pre-programmed phrases, and even the ability to create social stories or visual schedules right within the app.
That's amazing. It's like having a whole toolbox
I know.
of communication strategies right at your fingertips.
Right.
And with so many different options available, individuals can really find the tools that best suit their unique communication style and preferences.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about assistive technology. It empowers individuals to communicate on their terms in a way that feels authentic and comfortable for them.
It's about giving people a voice,
Yes.
regardless of the challenges they might face. And I love that it allows for so much creativity and personalization.
It really does. It can be a journey, discovering what works best for each individual.
Yeah.
And the results can be incredibly empowering.
This has been so insightful, and I'm sure our listeners are soaking it all in.
Yeah.
But before we move on to part 2 of this deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll be exploring even more about support strategies
Yeah.
and the latest research,
Yes.
I want to touch on one more point that really resonated with
I'm
me.
all ears.
Our research emphasized that sometimes the most powerful tools aren't technological at all, but rather they come down to something much simpler, yet equally vital, and that's patience and understanding.
I couldn't agree more. While all these strategies are incredibly valuable, we can't underestimate the power of creating a supportive and understanding environment for individuals with autism and dysnomia.
Absolutely. It makes me think that we could all benefit from incorporating a little more patience and understanding into our interactions,
Absolutely.
whether someone has a communication difference or not. But I'm curious to hear more about what this looks like in practice. How can we, as listeners, cultivate more patience and understanding when communicating with someone with autism and dysnomia?
That's a great question,
Mm.
and one we can certainly unpack in more detail.
Perfect. Because I think this is where the rubber really meets the road.
Yes.
It's one thing to like understand these conditions intellectually, but it's another thing entirely to translate that understanding into real-world action and compassion.
You're so right. And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive.
So we left off talking about the importance of patience and understanding,
Yes.
which feels like a perfect bridge to like dive deeper into practical tips for creating a more supportive environment.
Yeah.
What are some tangible things our listeners can do to like make a real difference in their interactions?
Yeah, I think it starts with shifting our mindset a little bit
Okay.
from fixing
Yeah.
to understanding.
Okay.
So instead of trying to finish someone's sentences for them
Right.
or jumping in with corrections right away,
Right.
we can practice active listening.
Okay.
Really focus on the message they're trying to convey,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if it's not coming out, perfectly or exactly how we would say it.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
We often get so focused on the like mechanics of speech
Yes.
that we miss the message entirely.
Totally.
It's like being so fixated on a typo in an email
Yes.
that you like miss the entire point the sender was making.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it can be so incredibly validating
Right.
for the person you're communicating with
Yes.
to feel truly heard and understood,
Yes.
even amidst their communication challenges.
100%. And that's huge.
It's about creating that like safe and supportive space where they
Yeah.
can express themselves
Yeah.
without fear of judgment or interruption.
Exactly. That's it.
What other like practical tips come to mind?
Another powerful thing we can do is kind of be mindful of our own communication style.
Okay.
So things like slowing down your speech slightly,
Okay.
enunciating clearly,
Uh-huh.
using simple, straightforward language.
Okay.
Try to avoid idioms or
Mhm.
figures of speech. So
Yeah.
these can be, difficult for individuals with autism to grasp, kind of literally.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about like meeting them halfway communication-wise
Yes, yes.
and creating a more like accessible and inclusive conversation.
Yeah.
So often we get caught up in our own way of speaking that we
Yeah.
forget that like what's clear to us
Right.
might not be clear to someone else.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
And even just those small adjustments can make a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another tip is to ask clarifying questions
Right.
instead of assuming that you understand.
Okay.
So, if someone is struggling to find a word,
Yeah.
you can gently offer suggestions, but always let them lead the conversation.
That's such a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's about empowering them to find their own voice
Yes.
and communicate in a way that feels comfortable for them,
Exactly.
even if it takes a little longer or looks a little different from what we're used to.
Yeah, yeah.
It's about respecting their autonomy and agency in communication.
I love that, yeah.
And along those lines, another important aspect of creating a supportive environment is being mindful of sensory input.
Yes.
We've already talked about how sensory overload can exacerbate dysnomia.
Right.
So try to create a calm and predictable environment
Yeah.
whenever possible.
For sure.
So, if you're meeting in a busy coffee shop
Yeah.
with loud music and flashing lights,
Right.
it might be more challenging for someone with autism and dysnomia to focus
Of course.
and communicate effectively,
Right.
maybe suggesting a quieter location. Yeah.
Or even just, I don't know, turning down the music could make a big difference.
100%. 100%. And I think
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask the individual directly about their sensory preferences.
Right.
They're the experts on their own experience.
Right.
And they can tell you what works best for them.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it all comes back to respecting individual differences.
Yes.
And creating a more inclusive and supportive world.
Exactly.
Everyone, regardless of how they communicate.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground here,
We have.
and I want to be mindful of our listeners' time,
For sure.
but there are a few more, exciting avenues to explore
There are.
when it comes to supporting individuals with autism and dysnomia.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, oh, what else can we dive into?
I'm glad you asked.
What else is there?
So we've talked about kind of those traditional support strategies,
Right.
like visual supports
Right.
and speech therapy.
We've touched on the, incredible potential of assistive technology,
Right.
but the world of support is constantly evolving,
Right.
and there are some truly cutting-edge approaches emerging.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're on the cusp of some really groundbreaking advancements in this field.
I think so.
What are some of the most promising developments you've come across in your research?
One area that I'm particularly excited about is the intersection of technology and neuroscience.
Okay.
Um, Researchers are developing sophisticated brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs,
Okay.
that have the potential to revolutionize communication
Wow.
for individuals with really severe communication impairments.
Brain-computer interfaces. That sounds straight out of science fiction.
I know, right?
How do they actually work?
So it is like something out of a science fiction novel,
Yeah.
but it's becoming a reality.
Wow.
Um, Essentially, what BCIs do is they use sensors to detect and interpret brain activity.
Okay.
So this allows individuals to control external devices.
Wow. Or even communicate directly with their thoughts.
Wow, so someone who might not be able to speak or
Yeah.
use their hands
Yeah.
could potentially communicate by simply thinking about what they want to say.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And while this technology is still in its early stages of development,
Okay.
the potential impact on communication
Yeah.
and quality of life for individuals with autism and dysnomia is truly remarkable.
It's amazing to think about the possibilities.
I know, it's very cool.
And it really speaks to the power of innovation and collaboration
Yes.
across different fields.
Totally.
Neuroscience, engineering, technology, speech language pathology, all coming together to create something truly transformative.
100%. It's really inspiring.
It is incredibly inspiring, and
Yeah.
it underscores the importance of continued research and investment in this area.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned that BCIs are just one example of these cutting-edge support strategies.
Yeah.
What other exciting developments are on the horizon? Another area that's showing a lot of promise is the use of virtual reality, or VR, in therapy.
Okay.
So VR allows individuals with autism to practice social skills
Okay.
and communication strategies
Uh-huh.
in a safe and controlled environment.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So someone could practice ordering food in a virtual restaurant
Exactly.
or navigating a social interaction with a virtual avatar before trying it out in the real world.
Exactly.
That's so valuable,
Yep.
especially for, individuals with autism who might feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
by the unpredictability of real life social situations.
For sure.
It's like having a dress rehearsal
Yes.
for those real life situations, allowing individuals to build confidence
Exactly.
and reduce anxiety in a more controlled setting.
That's it.
It sounds like a really promising tool for building communication skills
It is.
and confidence.
It is.
Now, shifting gears slightly, our research also touched upon the importance of early intervention,
Yes.
particularly for young children with autism and dysnomia.
Right.
Can you speak to why that early intervention is so crucial?
Yeah. Early intervention is like building a strong foundation for communication.
Okay.
So the earlier we can identify and address communication challenges,
Yeah.
the better the long-term outcomes are likely to be.
It's like catching a problem early on
Yes.
when it's easier to manage and address.
Exactly.
Are there specific signs
Yeah.
that parents or caregivers can watch for in their young children
Yeah.
that might suggest a need for further evaluation?
Absolutely. For toddlers, some common red flags might include delays in reaching language milestones,
Okay.
difficulty understanding simple instructions,
Uh-huh.
or a tendency to use gestures instead of words to communicate.
So if a child is consistently pointing or
Yeah.
using other nonverbal cues
Yeah.
instead of trying to use words, that could be a sign that something's up.
Exactly. And for older children, those red flags might look a little different.
Okay.
They might have difficulty following conversations, expressing their thoughts clearly,
Okay.
or understanding social cues.
It's so important for parents and caregivers to trust their instincts.
Yes.
And if they notice anything that concerns them about their child's communication development, don't hesitate to reach out to a pediatrician
Yeah.
or a qualified speech language pathologist for an evaluation.
100%. 100%.
Early intervention can make a world of difference.
It can.
And the sooner we can provide children with the support they need to thrive communicatively,
Yes.
the brighter their futures will be.
Well said.
That's a powerful message to end on.
It is.
And it speaks to the importance of awareness,
Yes.
understanding, and
Yeah.
advocating for the needs of individuals with autism and dysnomia,
Yeah.
not just during childhood, but throughout their lives.
It's an ongoing journey, for sure.
It is. And on that note, we'll wrap up part 2 of this deep dive. As we kind of wrap up here,
Yeah.
it's incredible to think about how far we've come in our understanding of autism and dysnomia,
Yeah.
but also how much more there is to discover and explore.
Absolutely. We're just, just scratching the surface. But I think this deep dive has highlighted a really, really crucial point.
Okay.
And that is, when we embrace the diversity of human experience and communication,
Yeah.
we create a richer and more inclusive world for absolutely everyone.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's not about trying to fit everyone into the same mold.
Right.
It's about appreciating the unique ways our brains work.
Yeah.
And how those differences
100%.
enrich our interactions and perspectives.
I love that. That's beautiful.
And it all circles back to empathy, right?
Yes.
Like taking a moment to imagine what it might be like to navigate the world with these specific challenges. To understand, like, the lived experiences of those around us, it can make all the difference.
It does.
In building bridges of communication and support.
Couldn't agree more.
It's about recognizing that communication is about so much more than just words.
Right?
Right. It's about connecting,
Yes.
understanding, and valuing each other's humanity,
100%.
regardless of how those messages are conveyed.
Beautifully said. That's it.
And it's a journey we can all embark on, together.
Absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Yeah. Good. Good.
And I'm sure our listeners are feeling the same way.
As they should. As they should. Curiosity is the seed of understanding.
It absolutely is. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
On this journey into the fascinating intersection of autism and dysnomia.
Such an important one.
Remember, creating a more inclusive and supportive world starts with each of us.
I love it.
Until next time, keep those deep dives going.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.